Yes. First of all, I just want to say thanks to staff for responding to questions from parents that I forwarded to you and including me in those responses. I really appreciate that. And then I also just want to do a shout out to Janelle Astorga with the VIA program for taking time to do a survey with students and, always taking that, just sort of presenting that lens to us and, listening to student voices. And speaking of student voices, I wanted to take an opportunity to do a shout out to Atrisco Heritage, specifically to Jessica Martinez, who is their activities director. I had a phenomenal opportunity to be engaged in a student council meeting that she organizes and facilitates easily. It was over 100 students on Google Meets and the whole 9 yards. And she was definitely, like the wizard behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, just making all the buttons work and making it all engaging and fun and exciting. I had an incredible opportunity to listen to young people talk about the experiences that they're having right now with remote learning. A lot of them acknowledging it isn't perfect, but a lot of them also acknowledging that it was the right thing to do because they also knew that their families were at risk. It was, one of the saddest moments for me during that conversation was when I did ask the students, how many of you have been impacted by COVID? And there were several. It was definitely more than this many. There was a lot. And there was also a young woman who expressed concern because she had lost a family member who died with COVID. So it sort of put into context and into light, how they're experiencing this, especially on my neck of the woods, and I want to say in 87121, where the numbers continue to be high. We still have hotspots in that particular zip code, and so they're really concerned. There were lots of concerns related, to when is going to be the right time to come back. There was lots of concerns about, they understand the complexity of the disease itself, and it was so nice. I mean, listening to young people, they're listening to us, they're listening to the news, and really feeling like, that there isn't a lot of faith in their capacity and their ability to get through this. There is a lot of faith, and we talked about that. I shared with them how I felt that this experience of being remote as high schoolers was also preparing them in incredible ways around just the future of work, because we know that even post-secondary education is going to have a huge remote component to it. And we talked a lot about self-regulating and managing their time, and there was lots of complaints about the number of assignments and that they feel stressed out, that they feel like they can't get all of that done. But I also listened to a lot of students that were talking about how it was pushing them, that it was pushing them to think differently and to do things out of the box. I also heard from students who were taking care of themselves, but also managing school, remote school for their younger siblings while their parents were working. And I have to say this because, and this part will almost make me get weepy, but they felt a real sense of a need to protect their parents who are essential workers. And so they're willing to make this sacrifice because they don't want to put their parents at risk who have to work. And so there was a lot of incredible resilience from this particular group of students who were talking about, we're managing all this because we know it's the right thing to do. There was one young man who was managing his remote learning, but also managing it for his nieces and a niece and a nephew, because everybody had to work. And then there were also concerns about if I go to work, because I'm also an essential worker, but I also know that I've been able to be protected because they understand the difference in terms of being the difference of exposure. They said, because where I'm working in terms of fast food, my exposure would not be at all the limits or the amount that I would have if I was in school and knowing that Atrisco Heritage is as large as it is, and it would just be almost impossible to socially distance. But what I do want to say too is that they also had and presented some thoughts and ideas. We talked about learning pods amongst themselves. How many of you have actually connected with each other outside of the classroom to engage in, learning or studying for math? And they thought that's a good idea. Also thought about potentially engaging smaller pods, who could come to campus because they were, needing to engage in something, but they also know that it's almost impossible in terms of the logistics. And I think that they were, it was refreshing, is what I want to say. It was a refreshing moment. It was at a low moment for me in terms of thinking, my gosh, we have so much on our plate, and we're getting hit by a lot of questions, and just sort of, it's easy to start to feel like, where you start to question your own logic or your own thinking. But being in that context with those young people and listening to them put it into context for me, because their lives matter and what they're experiencing is real. And I was really grateful, and it was on the fly. Jessica Martinez, I sent her a quick text and said, if I ever can be in front of students, I think I'd like to be able to listen to what they have to say. And it was literally overnight, and it happened. But again, the mastermind between, of her being able to do that, sharing her frustration as well, that it doesn't always work and it's not easy, but watching her with such grace and ease to just make it all happen, laugh through it, make us all feel that we were engaged and we were in the moment, and that it was important. And so I want to just do a real quick shout out. There were several students, but Alexis, if he's listening and he hears this, Alexis needs to be one of those student leaders for us, or an advisory member for us on our board. He definitely got it, because here's what he asked. He said, aside from COVID, because we know that that's front and center for the board, what else is the board considering for us? What are other important topics for you? And, how could we also help you with some of those topics? And so we talked about equity in the schools. We talked about class waivers, class sizes, school budgets. And so he's really interested in that, and I was really impressed with him. Another student that I was really impressed with was Christian, and he had his challenge was, and he said, I wear a mask for you out of respect. And for him to be able to articulate that with his classmates was great. And I also want to do a shout out to Ontario, who wasn't afraid to also express his concerns, because his thoughts are different. He goes, why is it that, malls are open and schools are not? So sort of also challenging us around the thoughts of why schools are not opening, but other places are. And his willingness to listen to that, and his students willing to listen to him as well. So we could learn so much in the community, and just, being a part of what these students were doing. So I will say that from a standpoint of workforce readiness, career readiness, everything that's happening with this particular student council has prepared these students in great ways. There's a lot of leadership coming out of that. There was a lot of articulation, and that is also an important education. And so I just wanted to say thanks to the students of Atrisco Heritage for giving me an opportunity to just crash your class and be part of your conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Montoya Cordova. I'll go on to Board